Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays, hosted by someone's favorite film buff, Nathan. I love movies and I want to share that with you. From old originals to cult classics and foreign favorites, along with straight up drivel, WWW is your place for all things movies. Stick around and we'll leave you with a movie to watch over the weekend with your family or that special someone. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome to What to Watch Wednesdays. My name is Nathan, the host of What to Watch Wednesdays, the show where we talk about 3 movies all in the same night. Tonight, excuse me a second, Hail Caesar! Now that I have that out of my system, let's jump into our topic tonight, because it consists of 3 movies that do not at all have the line Hail Caesar in them. But I decided to do that because I thought it was funny, and because the main character of the 3 movies we're talking about tonight is in fact named Caesar. He's an ape. You may not know immediately what I'm talking about, because this isn't exactly the most iconic thing out there. So, let me kind of directly spell out what we're going to be talking about tonight. Tonight, we are going to be covering the Planet of the Apes prequel series, which consists of 4 movies, but we're just going to talk about the first 3, starting with Rise of the Planet of the Apes from 2011, Dawn of the Planet of the Apes from 2014, and War for the Planet of the Apes from 2017. These are movies that I have talked about on What to Watch Wednesdays before, but it's been a while. It was back when I was still a freshman in college, and this was back when it was just a trilogy. I figured it would make sense to talk about these 3 movies, and then on What to Watch Weekends cover Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, because it's more than 1 month after that movie released, so I'm really staying up to date and on topic, but I also really like these movies. I remember really liking them when I first watched them, and rewatching them, I have some different opinions, but that's getting ahead of myself. I think it'll still be a very exciting show, despite any relevancy or lack of relevancy that it might have. So, when we come back from the break, we'll jump into the first movie, Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Stick around. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our first movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Rise of the Planet of the Apes from 2011, available to watch now on Max. For the basic plot summary of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, we follow Caesar, a genetically modified ape, who is raised by a lab scientist named Will. Will turns out to be responsible for creating Caesar in a way, or at least creating a specific side of Caesar, because Will is a genetic scientist whose main responsibility and job is to create a cure for Alzheimer's. Naturally, they ended up testing this cure for Alzheimer's on chimps before testing it on human beings, because sometimes humanity is kind of cruel. Anyways, one of those apes turned out to be Caesar's mother, and she ended up getting this Alzheimer's vaccine, and it ended up leading to her brain growing a lot faster and becoming a lot smarter than just a normal ape. Almost nearly human-level intelligence was bestowed on her. And then she dies. But her son, Caesar, survives and is taken in by Will. Over the course of the movie, we watch as Will raises Caesar. And I won't talk about what happens after that point, because I'd recommend watching the rest of the movie if you want to see how that whole scenario, that whole situation, that whole arrangement works out. I know that, and keep in mind that I just explained the first 20 minutes of the movie, so you may think that this is kind of a heavily plotted movie. My response to that is not really, weirdly enough. It's more so when I took a step back and actually looked up the plot again, just to get like a good basis for how I'd like to summarize the plot. It's only when looking at it again that I realized this movie doesn't have a super easy to summarize plot from the outside looking in. When you watch the movie itself, it feels rather lightweight. It feels very easy to wrap your head around it. And I find that really interesting. A lot of movies kind of seem to have that problem, where when you're watching it, it's not about really figuring out how all the pieces of the plot work together, because you're watching it as it unfolds, and you don't really need to summarize it. But when you tend to review them, you have to summarize them in some way, shape, or form. Or if you don't, maybe you should try to figure out how to summarize them. The point I'm trying to get at is it sounds like a lot. I promise it isn't. I will also say that in reality, those first 20 minutes are just a lot of setup to lead to what is essentially for the rest of the movie a very simple plot that I would describe as a generic boy and his dog scenario. Instead of it being a boy and a dog, though, it's a grown man and an ape. But it's still the same trope. It's still the same framework, you know. Caesar grows up. He's smarter now. He's too smart. He goes outside when he's not supposed to. John Lithgow plays the piano. The more I think about it, the more it feels crazy to say that it is a standard boy and his dog story. But the more I have to stick to my guns and realize it really is. And at the same time, while it sounds kind of unique, it is a little generic. Not bad, not badly executed in any way, shape, or form. Just a teeny bit generic in that execution. You can kind of figure out where things are going until the last 20 minutes. I'd say the last 20 minutes, 20 to 30, maybe 40, if I'm being generous, of this movie are where things start turning around. And for the better, definitely, but in a way that you wouldn't expect. That's the key point I'm trying to get at here, is you kind of expect where things are going with most of it. Maybe there's a twist once before those last 30 minutes, right? And the only reason I'm referring to it in such vague terms is because I really don't want to spoil this movie for you if you've never seen it before. I'd recommend Rise of the Planet of the Apes. I'd say it is worth your time. It just kind of comes with the warning of, oh, it's just a little generic in some parts, and maybe the ending will be the part that will be unique to you. And the first 20 minutes are very heavy on the detail. All of that goes to say that no matter how I break it down in terms of timing, I can never really get to an emotional core while reviewing this movie without mentioning the main character of the movie. No matter what I've said up to this point, I want you to keep it there, but also half forget about it as I tell you about the reason this movie is actually really worth watching. Because you don't just watch a movie for a good or decent or maybe even slightly generic plot. There's a reason that you sometimes watch a movie. There's a reason you sometimes stick around. Sometimes that has to do with the main character. And in the case of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, the main character of this movie is Caesar, the ape, the genetically modified, human intelligence level ape. Caesar is worth watching the movie for. Caesar is probably one of my favorite animated characters, probably one of my favorite movie characters of all time. Part of that comes down to the fact that he was motion capture animated and kind of performed, he was motion capture performed by the wonderful Andy Serkis, who is undeniably the king of motion capture acting. But part of it comes down to the fact that he's just a good written character, especially during that second half, especially during those last 40 minutes. There is something to him that not a lot of other characters can do. There's something about him that I find myself incredibly attached to, emotionally and just in general. It sounds like emotionally would be in that in general category, but I find it in two different categories. I find it in the sense of he looks really good, both in terms of just the technology itself, but also holding up as a visual effect, but also is a good character design. But emotionally, I connect with the character. I connect with the struggle of this creature, this creation, this thing with actual emotions to it. When it's a CGI ape, that's very difficult to do. The fact that they're able to pull it off almost flawlessly boggles my mind every single time. It's just so good at achieving that goal specifically that anything I have to say about it, anything else, can be negated by the fact that Caesar is in the movie. Unfortunately, the next movie kind of has a similar caveat, but in the opposite, in that no matter how many good things I say, there is still one bad element. but we'll get to that after the break. So stick around. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our second movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at Dawn of the Planet of the Apes from 2014, available to rent now from places such as Amazon, Fandango at Home, and YouTube. For the basic plot summary of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, many years after the events of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, Caesar is now in command of his own tribe of very intelligent apes, dealing with both a rebellious and anti-human ape named Koba and a group of humans looking to gain power from a dam in the middle of the apes' territory. Caesar has this strange push and pull as he must deal with the fact that he's both on the side of the apes and partially on the side of humanity, because humanity has been mostly wiped out in between the events of Rise and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, because that Alzheimer's cure that Caesar's mother was injected with that then passed on to him is a virus for human beings, but gives the apes higher intelligence than that of an ape. If you think about it too much, it kind of collapses in on itself, which is why you don't think about it too much. Please don't think about this too much when it's called Planet of the Apes. Keep that in mind as we talk about one interesting thing about this movie. One very interesting fact I have to give about Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is that it used to be my favorite out of these three movies that we're talking about tonight. I used to think that this was the best one. None of them topped it. Neither of them, none of them. Listen to me talking like I've seen all of the other Planet of the Apes movies when I've only ever seen these three movies and then the first one from 1968. Regardless, I used to think that Dawn of the Planet of the Apes was better than the one that came before it, and it's better than its sequel, which we will talk about in the next break. After rewatching it, though, my opinion changed, kind of drastically. I now consider it to be the quote-unquote worst in the three of them, not because it's bad, but in comparison to the other three, it has larger problems. A larger problem that I can't overlook. But we'll get to the good stuff first before talking about any of the problems or issues or bad stuff related to this movie. First off, because of the way this movie is structured, we basically go from the end of Rise of the Planet of the Apes to the beginning of Dawn, and it's been many years now. The apocalypse has happened for humanity, which means I can make the very stupid pun that they experienced the ape apocalypse. That's not the only good thing about the movie, but I had to make that joke. Anyways, other good things about this movie. We have this basic, once again, kind of generic story between Caesar and the ape Koba. Now, keep in mind, I kind of glossed over it, but Koba is actually a lieutenant. Like, he's essentially Caesar's right-hand man. They are friends in a way. They are very close friends. And when Koba starts to rebel against Caesar in a way, or it seems like it's going to go in that direction, more so I should say, it feels like a betrayal to Caesar, because it is. I used to think that this relationship, this kind of interlocking sort of basic idea of a plot used to have more substance to it than it actually does. That doesn't mean it doesn't have substance. I just used to think that they were really good at pretending that Koba was going to defect, but giving the audience just enough of a shadow of a doubt that he might not. Watching it back now, no, it's a pretty generic execution of the idea. But again, as we discussed with Rise, generic doesn't mean bad. Generic means it's been done before and you can see the ending coming. The execution is still good. The execution still works. You still get to the point and you still feel emotionally satisfied by the way the story progresses. So that's one good thing about it. I will also say that some of the surrounding elements around that core storyline really work. We have people like Gary Oldman and Kerry Russell, big name actor and actress in this movie that do a bang-up job in their small roles that they are given over the course of the movie. Because it's Planet of the Apes, you'd think that the humans would have less of a role, and that's because they do. But with what limited screen time they get, they do a bang-up job, and they deserve props for them, especially Gary Oldman. I love Gary Oldman. And Kerry Russell, I had a newfound love for Kerry Russell after rewatching this movie, if I'm being honest with you. And I will say that Caesar goes through some real character development while dealing with Koba and dealing with many of his internal struggles, both in an internal way and an external way. Again, most of that comes down to Andy Serkis's performance. If it wasn't Andy Serkis, it would not look as good. Visually, it still looks amazing. Musically, it's bumped up a notch from the Rise of the Planet of the Apes because they got Michael Giacchino in there. We've got Matt Reeves directing the movie. There's a lot of good things about Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Rather unfortunately, there was one thing about this movie that stuck out to me on rewatch above all the rest. There is a couple things I could say that don't work about this movie. We've got this human character who's the quote-unquote main human character named Malcolm. He's in the movie, and I don't like him. We also have Caesar's son, who doesn't have that much of an arc, despite the one they tried to give him. We also have Malcolm, the main human character who's in the movie. I don't really like him. Then we have another human character named Carver. He's in the movie to sow conflict for no reason and be annoying and a brat and wide-eyed and have no hair and be really annoying. But he's not as annoying as Malcolm, the main human character in this movie. He's in there and I don't like him. And alongside Malcolm, we have Malcolm. We have Malcolm, the main human character in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, the main human guy who I don't really like his performance or his contribution to the story. Have I mentioned that I don't really like the character Malcolm yet, or the way he's performed? I think I have about 4 times now, actually. That's still not enough times. Did I mention that I don't like Malcolm? Okay, let me break this down for you. I could say so many things about Malcolm. About him in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, that he's boring, uninspired, annoying, not a favorite character, generic, a generic white guy with curly hair, again, just a generic guy. The reason he annoyed me so much is with how little he contributes to the story, and what little he does contribute consists of a character trait that I have never seen in any generic character ever. I'm being serious here. I've never seen this generic of a character have this annoying of a character trait. But imagine a character who is being followed incessantly and is meant to be the foil to our main ape character of Caesar, right? And his character trait, Malcolm's character trait, is when Caesar tells him to leave. When Caesar gets fed up with his nonsense and with humanity, with humans being in his territory, Malcolm's trait is to go to Caesar and beg him to let him stay. Caesar just told him to leave, and he comes back and says, "Hey, Caesar, can I still stay?" No, you can't. Go away. If I go any further, I'm going to get so mad and start yelling even louder than I already have been. So we're going to go to break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about War for the Planet of the Apes. I'm so very sorry if I hurt your ears just then. Be right back. 88.1 The Burg, your movie central. Welcome back to What to Watch Wednesdays. And for our third and final movie on the watch list tonight, we will be taking a look at War for the Planet of the Apes from 2017, available to watch now on Amazon, Fandango at home, and YouTube through renting. For the basic plot summary of War for the Planet of the Apes, a few years after the events of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, Caesar must now confront heavy losses in a war against a ruthless colonel. This sounds like the most simple plot out of the 3, if I'm being honest with you. Now that I've read down what I've written out on paper, this sounds like the simplest plot. And it kind of is. It's really just, it's simple. And it's not as generic as I was expecting it to be. What, I wonder what I'm trying to get at here. I'll spell it out for you. Here's the thing about War for the Planet of the Apes. When I first watched it, after watching Dawn and Rise, I thought it was okay. I thought it was just okay. I thought, it's a bit overrated, if anything. Because at the time, I remember reading somewhere that this was the best Planet of the Apes movie, or at least considered to be the best of the Planet of the Apes movies out there, and good on its own merits. Now, I'm sitting there going, yeah, it's kind of overrated. And this is me a couple years ago when I first watched it. Having sat back down, watched it all the way through, and had some time to process, I can confidently say that I was just being contrarian for the sake of being contrarian when I said it was overrated. It is, if anything, mildly underrated, but not really. It is properly rated, in my opinion. War for the Planet of the Apes is definitely the best out of the three. That's for darn sure, especially in my opinion, but I would say it is the best out of the three. It has so many good qualities to it that outweigh any of the problems that Dawn of the Planet of the Apes had, and so much originality and interesting ideas being thrown at you that make it a completely different thing from what Rise of the Planet of the Apes even was, which was mildly generic. It has the best of both worlds, conquering both of them at the same time. I'll say it this way. First off, after I had a long rant about how I didn't like the main human character in Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, this movie aims to fix that problem almost immediately by having the Colonel, the main antagonist, be a human being played by Woody Harrelson. Woody Harrelson as the Colonel, magnificent. He is wonderful. He is wonderfully performed. His monologue is awesome. So many parts about him just work. He's brutal. He's evil. It's great. I can't get any further into that, or it'd be spoilers, but know that they fixed it by casting Woody Harrelson. Alongside that, it's probably the most visually gorgeous out of the three. I'll be honest with you. I haven't harped on the visuals as much as I should have for the last two movies, and even then I still brought it up. Sure, you've got Andy Serkis' performance, which is still great. And the fact that Caesar's character design works for me was very surprising, but unsurprising because it is good character design. Keep in mind, that goes for all of the other apes. All of the other apes have really good character design. Most, if not all of them, are like exactly what I would think of when I think of apes in movies these days. I love nearly all the side characters apes as well. Side character apes. Side apes. The side characters that are apes. I love all of them. I love all their designs. I love all the way they work. All the ways they work. And some of the side characters introduced in this movie stand out from the other ones as being entertaining, but also progressing the story forward. There's Bad Ape, played by Steve Zahn. Massive shout out to him. We all love and appreciate Bad Ape. Alongside that, we have a beautiful music score, an absolutely poignant and melancholic and horrifyingly sad musical score that fits the movie perfectly, if I'm being honest with you. Michael Giacchino obviously knew what he was doing for this movie, because if anything, everybody else knew what they were doing with this movie. They knew that this was the movie they had all wanted to make when they started Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Started with Rise of the Planet of the Apes. This felt like a movie that had been desired to be made. I don't know if that's grammatically correct, but there was a strong desire, clearly from the people making this movie, to make this movie. And none of that is exemplified more kind of clearly to me in the tonal shift. If I'm being honest with you, this movie tonally is completely different from the other two. It's dark, it's brutal, it's violent a lot more in-your-face violent than the other two, but in a way that doesn't feel illogical. It feels like a jump, especially from that last bit of Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and especially coming off the backs of Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. There are parts in that movie that are kind of dark. It feels like not jarring. It felt inevitable in a way that it would go as far as it does in certain points. It doesn't provide whiplash, is what I'm saying. It doesn't feel out of left field. It feels like it's working in tandem with the things set out in place. And it felt like there was an intentional kind of air towards it with the two movies before it, which is always a nice thing to see. I will say that with all that in mind, I think the one complaint, the one heavy criticism I could give for the Planet of the Apes that does actually count. I feel like this is something that should be understood. More so than a lot of other series I've seen out there. War for the Planet of the Apes does rely on seeing the others. And by that, I mean, you can watch the original from 1968 and then watch the other two prequels and be completely fine. That's what I've done. Sure. But you do need to watch the other two prequels. And it is directly connected to those two in some ways. There are certain things that happen in here that will not be significant to you unless you've seen the other two. Of course, it's a sequel. So it's supposed to, it makes sense that it is that way. But keep in mind, I wouldn't bring that up unless it feels like if you didn't have the other two, you couldn't make this movie. Without the other two, you could not make this movie. That's one reason that I bring it up. That can be said about a lot of sequels, but it can't always be said. And with this movie especially, I feel like tonally, going off the heels of the other two is what made it work so well. What made the music stand out more, what made the development stand out more. The arc itself, concerning Caesar, the main character, would not mean anything to anybody if you hadn't followed him since Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. Feels so generic and contrived to say, but at the same time, I know for a fact that I believe this very strongly. I will also say that keep in mind, for a movie that is called War for the Planet, it's very good at commentating on war. At the same time, you got to keep in mind that you're watching a movie with CGI apes commentate on war. And you're watching movies in a series called Planet of the Apes. I'm not saying you can't take it seriously. What I'm saying is, if they took it any more seriously than they ended up taking it, it would have collapsed in on itself. Because it is about CGI apes. Anyways, that concludes my thoughts on these three movies for tonight at least. But for those of you who are interested in hearing some more breakdowns and me talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, please be sure to tune in this Saturday from 8 to 10 p.m. here on 88.1 The Burg for What to Watch Weekends, where I'll be going over these three movies again, and then Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, maybe the original movie, maybe the 2001 Tim Burton movie, if I have time and the energy to stomach that nonsense. But no promises. We will definitely be talking about Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Alongside that, if you're interested in keeping up with What to Watch Wednesdays, please be sure to follow What to Watch Wednesdays on Instagram at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces, and on YouTube at What to Watch Wednesdays, all one word, no caps, no spaces. Again, I will be back next week here on 88.1 The Burg for another episode of What to Watch Wednesdays at 8 p.m., where I'll be telling you all what to watch. Good night, everybody.